A couple of announcements. Please check your cell phones. I had to check mine, double check, and make sure you're on. Also, people are laughing. That's a good thing. The bathrooms are, the women's bathroom is right out here. Go straight out the door and just a little bit to your left. The women's bathroom is there. And the men's bathroom is straight out the door, and then to the left, go through the red door and upstairs to the second floor. And it's there on the right. You'll see if you can get to the second floor. I want to talk a little bit about dharma, which are donations for the teacher, our guest speaker tonight, and for the center. And I'll say a little bit about it afterwards as well. When we have teachers come to the center, they give their time and their wisdom freely. And what we can do to support them is give as much financial support as we can. And one way that you'll know if it feels right is to think about, if I give too much, it might not feel right to me. And if I give too little, it might not feel right to me. So just think about that. Some of you have made donations already, and if you haven't, feel free to do that at the end of the session. And of course, if you can pay more, and if you can't, you don't have to either. Again, everyone is welcome here. This event is hosted by the Multicultural Affairs Committee. Would people on that committee raise their hands so we know a couple of us are here? Good, thank you. So if you're interested in joining that committee, what we do is host a lot of events and have started a People of Color sit. And if you'd like to be part of that committee, you can see someone who raised their hand after the session is over. Thank yous. I wrote down as many as I could. See if I can get them all. Tom, Hal, Barbara, Andrew, Adam, Kathy, Ann, and then I just put, and many more people behind the scenes. And that way it should cover. For those of you that don't know, we're the Insight Meditation Center at Pioneer Valley. Our main center is upstairs on the second floor. If you walk this way upstairs and down the hall, you can tell who we are because we have loads of flyers outside the door. And we have open sits on Monday and Wednesday evenings. And you can find out more about the events we have. There's a table with flyers back to the left as you leave tonight. And we accept anyone, newcomers to meditation, experienced meditators, anyone who's interested in learning more about meditation in the center, please come to any of our events and our open sittings. And now I'll stop. We'll get to the important stuff. I'd like to introduce Venerable Pannavati. She's the Co-Abbot of Embracing Simplicity Hermitage in North Carolina. She's an African-American Buddhist monk, and she advocates on behalf of disempowered women and youth globally, and insists on the quality and respect in Buddhist life for both female monastics and lay sangha. She was a 2008 recipient of the Outstanding Buddhist Women's Award. Welcome, Venerable Pannavati.
So I guess we should open. Thank you so much for inviting me. I had a delightful ride out to the west. This is west of where I was at Harvard yesterday. And so it was a great 2-hour trip out. We will endure time because I have a 2-hour drive back. Usually, you know, I come from a Pentecostal tradition, and if it was all night, it was all right. And so that's really why I had my phone with me so I could check the time. But thank you for providing a clock for me. So I guess we should open, and we're going to do something a little bit differently tonight. I know we're used to coming in and sitting and meditating and then hearing Dharma talk. But I really hope you can appreciate the meditation being informed by the teaching tonight so that we can go a little bit deeper. And some of the things that I'd like to share tonight, maybe you'll hear some of this for the first time. Maybe you won't even like what you hear, but that's all right. You know, my Majima Nikaya at home, I can hardly travel with it anymore because, you know, the pages have all come loose from the binding. But the most important thing is, as I flip through it, if there are any Tibetans or former Tibetans, please forgive me because they don't write in their books or anything like that. But as I went through the book and I looked through it, I'd see that's not true. I don't believe that. That doesn't make any sense. I don't understand. I'm not doing that. But over the years, as I have come back to it, and light has dawned, my view and my paradigm has changed. And so I say that this dharma, and we are going to open up formally, this dharma is like wading out into a stream. And when you're at the shore of the lake or the stream or the river, it's kind of muddy, and when you step, your feet sink down in it, and you have this plop sound as you have to kind of struggle to get your feet out. But as you move a little further out, your feet sort of get tangled in vines, but they don't sink in the mud. And as you go further out, it becomes a little more groundless. We barely touch the ground. Some buoyancy is starting to just manifest as we present ourselves at its door. And then you get to the middle of the stream, and there is a current. And the current just takes you where there is to go. And so I say sometimes we are struggling, and sometimes people say to us, don't exert effort, just like be here now, or to, these kinds of things. But we have to understand the right combination of effort and being at ease. And so, what was the title of my talk supposed to be?
Tapping into ever-ready wisdom.
Oh yes, tapping into ever-ready wisdom. This is it. That's what we talk about. And so I want to say to you, we do make effort to get out into the river. But the thing is that the more effort we make, there is empowerment that is coming, that is meeting us, enabling us to move forward. A buoyancy manifests. I do talk with my hands. We train not to do it, but it just didn't work real good. And as we get all the way to the middle, then, the current just takes us where we're trying to go. So keep that in mind as I share some of these things that we're not trying to hear tonight, right now, okay? Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. I vow to avoid killing living things. I vow to avoid taking what is not given. I vow to avoid sensual misconduct. I vow to avoid false speech. I vow to avoid malicious speech. I vow to avoid harsh speech. I vow to avoid gossip. I vow to avoid covetousness. I vow to avoid ill will. I vow to avoid wrong feelings. These are called the 10 virtues that we should perfect in this day and time when we're so committed to intellectualism, so committed to rationalization, so committed to facts and knowing. I always say that I love science, but one time science told me that the earth was flat. So I like to inform my science with something. And what I have found is that the Dharma has not let me down as science has emerged into the forefront. And so I kind of, rather than inform the Dharma with my science, because there's so much science emerging right now, they're just catching up, and I'm informing science with my Dharma. It's a wonderful thing. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 26. And I had planned in the beginning for us to take a few minutes, like 10 minutes to meditate, but I want to make sure that I have enough time to finish this. And the teaching itself will settle you down. The teaching itself is so profound that it will bring us here Is that better? Okay, great. And so Sutta number 26 in the Majjhima Nikaya is the Noble Search. And this is a discussion that the Buddha had with some disciples. And I'd like to just share a little bit about it because it's so apropos for today. In this sutta, he stood outside the door because the disciples were having a discussion, and he waited for them to finish their discussion. And when he knew it was over, he tapped lightly on the door, and it says he coughed to let them know he had arrived. So he didn't want to disturb their discussion. He wanted to let them talk it out and see where they were, because he was just getting ready to hit them with something. And he wanted them to see so clearly the difference in what they had assumed and what they were reaching for versus what he had to offer. And then he said, Bhikkhus, for what discussion are you sitting together here now? And what was your discussion that has been interrupted? And he said, Venerable Sir, our discussion was on the Dharma. And he said, good, Bhikkhus, it is fitting for you clansmen to get together and discuss the Dharma. When you discuss, when you gather together, you should do either of two things: hold discussion on the Dharma or maintain noble silence. Now, sometimes we're always talking about noble silence, but like if the body's here and the mind's on the other side of town, that's not noble silence. Noble silence is, it's basically entering into the second jhana, where applied and sustained thought on your object of meditation has really fallen away, and you're abiding in that piti and bliss that comes from being unified with your object. It is the separating or destroying or the letting go of the dissolving of duality. And so that's what noble silence really is. But he said if you're not going to do that, then you should have discussion on the Dharma. And I like to give a definition for the Dharma, but I'd like to hear your definition of what Dharma is. And so if anybody just wants to call out in a few words what they think the Dharma is, please feel free. Yeah.
The truth of what is.
The truth of what is. Anyone else?
The lessons of life.
The lessons of life.
Love.
Love.
The path.
The path.
Mindfulness.
Mindfulness. Being.
Our bodies.
Our bodies.
Teaching on impermanence.
Teaching on impermanence. And so you can see that we all have an idea of what we consider the Dharma to be. And some are very similar, some are not that similar. But I like to think of it sort of, I guess you might call it the right fulfillment of life. No, you won't find that in the Majjhima Nikaya anywhere. But we have to learn how to define things for ourselves in a way that we can understand them and that they propel us towards our goal. And that's one way that I define the Dharma. If I make it something that sits apart, that has no bearing for me, then I can't. We don't mingle. We don't come together. But when I give it meaning within the conduct of my life, when I merge with that, then I can understand what to do with the Dharma. And I can understand that there's no fear in the Dharma, and I can be open to try to understand those points that I disagree with, and those points that seem superfluous, or those points that seem arbitrary or outmoded or outdated. All of these kinds of things, I'm able to hold them with a certain, not only respect, but a certain confidence that if I live long enough, that I might learn something that utterly changes my paradigm. So I like to think of it, you know, as this kind of right fulfillment of life, right use of life, how to seize the essence of this precious human life. And so he told them, he taught this Dharma, he said there are two kinds of search. One is the noble search, and one is the ignoble search. And he said, what is the ignoble search? Here someone, being himself subject to birth, seeks what is also subject to birth. Being himself subject to aging, seeks what is also subject to aging. Being himself subject to sickness, he seeks what is also subject to sickness, and being himself subject to death, he seeks what is also subject to death. What is also subject to sorrow. Being himself subject to defilement, he seeks what is also subject to defilement. And what may be said to be subject to birth? Wives and children are subject to birth. Men and women, servants or slaves, goats and sheep, fowl and pigs, elephants, cattle, horses, mares, gold and silver, subject to birth. These are objects of attachment. They are subject to birth, and one who is tied to these things, infatuated with them, and utterly committed to them, being himself subject to them, seeks what is also subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, lamentation, grief, despair, and defilement. So that means that our mindfulness practice, you know, first of all, we're already mindful. We're all mindful of something. It's just what are we mindful of? And our mindfulness practice has to take us beyond the place that we are remain attached to what is subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, lamentation, grief, despair, defilement, all of that. So like if you look at the things that he names, identifies, and categories, these are the things that we think give meaning to our lives. So right away we're, you know, somebody's going horizontal and somebody's going vertical. We've got a perpendicular intersection coming up here. And so he said that is the ignoble search. He said, and what is the noble search then? He said the noble search is that someone being himself subject to birth, having understood the danger in what is subject to birth, seeks the unborn supreme security from bondage, nibbana, being himself subject to aging, and understood the danger in what is subject to aging. He seeks the unaging supreme security from bondage, nibbana, being himself subject to sickness, and subject to death, and subject to sorrow, and subject to defilement, seeks the undefiled supreme security from bondage, nibbana. This is the noble search. So we use the Buddha's teachings to help us be happy in this life. And happiness in this life is, how to be happy with our things, how to be happy with who we love, how to be happy, in our homes, in our jobs, how to find fulfillment in our talents, all of these things. And I'm not saying that we cannot seek to understand and find some purpose for all of that. But he says, I tell you directly that this does not lead to the noble goal. So it's okay. The point is, we don't want to be on the 50-yard line running, and get to 35 and sit there and sit the football down and say, goal. We have to go be below the 1-yard line and cross over into the goal. That's it. And so when we are endeavoring to understand the noble path, and when we say we are on the noble path, we should understand what that is. Now, this was a very serious discussion that the Buddha gave, and I can tell it's a serious one tonight. I'm not telling anybody to go home and divorce your significant other, to give away your children, quit your job. I'm not saying do any of that. I'm saying that he was introducing us to something that is greater and that was beyond what mere reasoning and intellect alone could unveil for us. He says in verse 19, this is a great sutta to study. I consider this dharma that I have obtained is profound. It's hard to see and hard to understand, peaceful and sublime, unattainable by mere reasoning. It's subtle. It's to be experienced by the wise. But this generation delights in adhesion. It takes delight in adhesion. It rejoices in adhesion, in attachment. It is hard for such a generation to see this truth, namely specific conditionality, dependent origination. And it is hard to see this truth, namely the stilling of all formations, of all thoughts, the relinquishing of all attachments, the destruction of craving, dispassion, cessation, nibbana. And then he thought, if I were to teach this dharma, others would not even understand me. And that would be wearying and troublesome for me. Thereupon came to me spontaneously a stanza that had never been heard before. And then he goes into the stanza. So this was the Buddha's dilemma. He said, folks just not going to get this. Number one, they're not going to get it because they don't want to get it. There's a certain will involved. And that's where I'd like to start. This process of will must be there. The Buddha said before you do a thing, say a thing, or think a thing, consider whether it's beneficial or unbeneficial. I used to have such a struggle with how do you consider a thing before you think it, of whether it's beneficial or unbeneficial. But you see, he was telling us that when we embark on the noble search, we access faculties that are beyond the capacity and the space of our critical thinking mind. So that's why you can't get this by reasoning alone. It is not mundane and ordinary. It is super mundane, but we can enter into it. It can be known. But that's the great joy, the great hope of this dharma. I mean, if all I could get from this is what every Joe Blow could Paul parrot and recite to me, it wouldn't be worth anything to me.
You know, but when I give everything, it's like finding a pearl of great price and selling all you have to buy it. And there is something that you're expecting from it that supersedes every expectation, every experience, every bit of knowing you have ever had. And if you're not looking for that, then it becomes ordinary and mundane, and then you get what you expect. Ordinary and mundane. And so he was saying to them, don't set your bar so low. This is not that. This is not what your philosophers can tell you, what your scientists can tell you, what your doctors can tell you, what your psychotherapists can tell you. This is not that. This is more than that. All of that's good. But all of that fits into this container, and it's more than all of that. So he tells us that there is this process of will, and he says that it's like it's germinating when we come into being. So he says you have the sperm and the egg, and we think these two come together and produce life, but there's another ingredient, there's another process, there's another aspect to this, and that's that rebirth linking consciousness. Now we're like, well, you're going too far. I just want to be a human being, and I believe in one life, and that's it. When you start talking about these other kinds of things, you're losing me. But we should know what the teaching is. We can decide how far we want to go in with it. We can decide. But let me have the choice to decide. Don't set that bar so low for me and say, with his teachers said, well, when he reached the base of nothing, that's all there is to it. He said, I believe there must be more. And then when he reached the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, that teacher said, that's all there is to it. And I haven't even reached it, but my teacher did, and now you have, so why don't you come take over my community and teach? He said, I believe there must be more, because I have not crossed into the deathless. What came before aging, sickness, death, sorrow, suffering, lamentation, grief, despair, defilement. What came before being? He said, that's what I'm after. And that's when he left, and he went off by himself to seek it. And he's called the kind of Buddha who did not have a teacher. Because what he discovered, there was no one here to teach it to point him. He was pointed into a certain direction, but it ended. It ended still stuck in something that was created, created. And so it was subject to decay. Now that's his teaching. So whenever I am learning something, I'm looking to see what it means. In this life, we talk about trying to find our purpose. What is our purpose? What is our purpose? I stopped asking that question when I heard his dharma. I thought, okay, so I see I don't have a purpose. Purpose, I'm here due to causes and conditions, So there was something before now that caused the appearance of who we call Pannavati. That's how it started for me, because I believed in that one, that one lifetime, that's it. I come from that tradition. I was very firm on that. But now he's opening up something. He said, Pannavati, think about it. Does it make sense? Just all of a sudden, boop, you just appeared, and this was the beginning? Everything, everywhere we look in nature, shows us that what is apparent is the condition that was produced by some cause. And so it allowed me to open up a little bit to maybe there's something, well, and he says, and I'll tell you this too, you know, just don't think so much that you got the way you are by yourself, your present self. Don't think you got the way you are by all of the influences that are in your life, the present life. There was a rebirth linking consciousness that gave this present appearing phenomena a certain temperament. It gave it a certain, maybe, you know, when you have a savant or you have, you know, someone who's a protege, you have someone who's like, and when you have a child and you look at him and say, I don't know where he came from. He's not like either one of us. I mean, he doesn't fit in this family. They mixed him up at the hospital or something. But you know that child comes in with his own temperament, own personality, own ways, you know. And one spiritual tradition says that we should observe the child so that we can train him up in his way. Of course, we always try to train them up in our way, what we want for them, you know. And what we think will bring them good success and bring them happiness, you know, not understanding that there is a karmic link and there is something unfolding here and there is cause and condition at work. And the wiser we get with this, the more we're able to meet the vicissitudes of life, whether it's praise or blame, loss or gain, pleasure or pain, shame or fame, it doesn't matter. We can understand what produced the present condition. And sometimes we win, and that's wonderful. And then we also learn to accept defeat and give the victory to others. This is the kind of practice that is born from the noble search. And so we have to be careful how we piece together the Buddha's dharma, how we slice it and dice it, how we toss this out and this out and say, oh, we'll just keep this. The dharma is now this. A lot of times we don't even use, you know, the word dharma because maybe that's like just too broad. And we call it one little thing. And we say, this is what the Buddha taught. And if we do, we will find ourselves narrow and confined and totally insufficient, no matter how much of a banner we wave. It will be insufficient because it meets only partially our current need, not taking into account cause and effect, conditionality, the links of dependent origination, and what came before now, what came before this life. And so will this willingness to drop the boxes that confine us, the knowledge that we do have that blocks wisdom and knowledge that we could enter into, access, that we could access. You know, that willingness, he says, the seed, the germ is there. The germ is that part that gives life in the seed. Of course, the intellect is there, whether it through conditions is developed or whether it's retarded. But the wisdom is also there. It's not out there anywhere to be found. We can say it's in here, but it's not really in here either. You understand that? I mean, if you cut me open, you won't hunt and go hunting for the wisdom, you won't find it. But there is an inner life, an inner journey that if we embark upon and really open ourselves to it. You know, this is when we start, when direct experience starts to become more important than facts. Yeah. We used to say when I used to be in business, facts tell and benefits sell. You know, we start to want the benefit, and not just so that you think I have it, but that I know I have it. And so he tells us that as we enter into the silence, this meditative practice, that the first thing we should be that we should know is available to us is the stilling of thought. You know, so if I'm sitting here doing mindfulness practice and I'm just watching the mind move and I'm, you know, just observing it and going with it, I know the mind is not still. So I may look very still out on the outside, and I can maybe sit for hours, you know, but it's still a monkey mind going, and I'm just observing the monkey swing from branch to branch. But he said this brings us to a place of stilling of thought. You know, so it's a dropping of our mental fabrications and our mental concepts. But that's not the end. He said you're positing yourself then at the doorway to something, to use a phrase from another tradition, that eyes haven't seen, ears haven't heard, neither has it entered into your heart. That kind of joy and bliss is available to us. And because the world didn't give it to us, the world can't take it from us. And so when we are sitting for our mindfulness to have ultimate benefit, he said we are mindful of something. First of all, it's the three characteristics, but then it penetrates beyond the three characteristics to dependent origination. And if my mindfulness is not inuring to that result, then I'm doing the baby worldly attachment kind of mindfulness. You know, how to be happy with my things. But what this will give us is so much of an understanding that we can still be with our things and not be the least bit attached to them. So now we're embarking upon the first stages of freedom. The stickiness is gone. So much of, you know, I was co-leading a retreat with another teacher, and she said she really wanted to go over what I had planned and, you know, everything we're going to say and, you know, and all of that. And I said, you know, I can't really do it that way. I said, I don't plan. I prepare, but I don't plan. You know? Because the thing about planning is then we try to make it work out the way we planned it. But if I look in this room and there's, I don't know how many, 50 or 60 people in here, and we all have a plan, we're not going to be able to do everybody's plan. So somebody's going to be unhappy. So it's best for us to come together. And if we can come together in noble silence, in the second jhana, where we have dropped off this duality of an object and an observer, and we're like my burning, my Zen he calls it grokking, and we're just grokking, then I know what you know. I feel what you feel. I know what needs to be said to soothe a mind, to bring an understanding, to challenge or provoke one, to arouse more energy. And different ones need different things, and everybody wants to leave with something. But to access, to touch this wisdom that is already available to us. The seed of it is there, rested. You know, he said if it wasn't there, there would be no way for you to attain. No way to become a Buddha if the seed of a Buddha was not already there. So some people go around talking about, well, don't worry, I'm a Buddha already. No, you're not. The seed, the germ is there. You know, it's got to have the right amount of water. Yeah, the right amount of sunshine. You know, the right amount of shade. Sometimes you have to throw a little fertilizer in there and heat it up a little bit so things can grow better. But when we are doing this, when we are tending to the little supple plant that is growing from the seed, then it is of great benefit. It grows strong and it grows sturdy, and it's a steady growth. That's what gives so much joy in the practice. I tell you, I know monks are not supposed to be excited, but I'm so excited because every day, almost every moment, there's a freshness and there is a newness, and at the same time, there is nothing that I am estranged from or that seems like the other. You know what I mean? That's why I can come into a room and I don't care who's in the room. I know you. You are me. I am you. And all of the fears that we have then start to fall away. And the scales fall from our eyes. And some of those propensities that we came in with that form the 6 personalities that the Buddha talked about, one of a hating temperament, one of an intelligent temperament, one of a faithful temperament, one of a delusional temperament, one of a speculative temperament, and there's another one.
Aversive temperament?
Nope.
Greedy?
No. Let me start again. Greedy, hating, intelligent, faithful, speculative, and delusional. There, those 6. But that we came with, that karma tie, we begin to loosen that knot. And we start to grow and to advance. And that's the joy. You know, people think they know you, but they don't know you. People think they know you, but they don't know me like I know me. So I know where the hindrances are. Sometimes, oh, no, I don't want to face them. That's why I put it on you. It's his fault. She made me do that. Look what you made me do. But when we're at that space, it's been said to know the dharma is to know one's self. This is our total job, to seize the essence of this precious human life. Not the things we're busying ourselves with. Of course, they're okay, but let them be also ran. You know what I mean? Let them be the appendages. It's like, get the turkey in the center of the table and put all of these things around it. And then you'll be able to enter into a right fulfillment of life. And when it's juxtaposed, when it's not in its right formation, we feel the tension of it. We feel the stress of it. We experience the dukkha of it. That's all the dukkha is. It is our friend that's letting us know, looking over here, you should be looking over there. You know, that's it. So the easing of it, or the eradication of it, the lifting of the dukkha, comes into us slipping into the groove of life. It's like being on that wheel, and he started talking about, you know, the aspects of the wheel and the 8 aspects of this path. And if we spend our time evaluating, and it's like being on a tightrope, walking a tightrope. You can't lean too far to the left, you can't lean too far to the right, but you also can't walk it straight like this. He said there has to be like this kind of thing. You know, there's a little leaning to the left, a little leaning to the right. That very flexibility that allows every moment to be a now moment. No longer making anything a preconceived notion. No longer does anything have to fit any particular pattern. No longer, it's destroying the concretized world that we have created. And this is the invitation of the Buddha. Now we need to chew on that a little bit and see what that means. We know for ourselves that we have an expectancy of something. From the time we begin to really think about life and what the meaning of life is, you know, we're thinking about it because there is some part of us that is constantly expanding. And we try to meet that expanding need by, you know, getting into things, by doing things, by buying things, by having things, by, you know, but we can't deny that we all have this moreness, M-O-R-E, I don't know if that's a word, moreness aspect. And we try to fulfill it. And the thing is, we're not so far off. Because we are looking for that. Being born and in a realm and a space of aging, sickness, and death, we are looking for the deathless and don't know what to call it. We're looking for something more than this, more than what we have, more than what life brings us on a daily basis. And so we try to create it. When that doesn't work, we make it up in our mind, we fabricate. When that doesn't work, you know, then we go postal. And when that doesn't work, we sink into a depression. There's no hope. There's no answer. A confusion. I can't find it. Life's not worth living. So I'm saying to you, this moreness that we feel is the very fire that propels us to get on this search. So let us not reduce it to mere intellectual blah blah. Let us not, our very life depends on not doing that. And the very opportunity, just maybe, attaining nibbana in this life. The Buddha would talk a lot of times. In this particular sutta, he said himself, he would talk about while I was just an unenlightened bodhisattva, this and that and the other. Yeah. And so, one time I was asked, is the bodhisattva path, you know, like Theravadins, we don't talk about that too much, but they did have this understanding in the early days. It's sort of fallen by the wayside because the group split off, and the group that split off were the ones who were really, who had an eye to also see the suffering of people in the world. They said, you know, compassion is important. You know. And then they sort of like carved it and built a monument about it and said, we're the ones that are compassionate, y'all the ones. You know, something like that. But I can't say that I know for a fact that it is a requirement for Buddhahood. But what I do know is that the Buddha walked that path, the path of the Bodhisattva. The one who hears the cries of the world and responds with compassion and power. Okay, leave the power out because the compassion is not complete by itself. The compassion, actually the right compassion, you know, he's always talking about the right this. I know sometimes we have a little problem with right, you know, because we're grown now and nobody can tell us about right and wrong. I say who, I say when, I say how. That's how we think as adults. But if we're not afraid of these kinds of words, they will open up for us in a way that we can relax. We can be at ease. We can be cradled by them. And we can be nurtured by them. And we can be released by them. We can be delivered. We're not going to be able to find it with our ordinary run-of-the-mill intellect, our ordinary run-of-the-mill thinking. It is not possible, he said. And so, this way of compassion must offer us something. It offers us the very thing that we try to get into intellectually, like how to forget about ourselves, how to give up so much of self-cherishing and cherish others. You know, how to be able to identify with the suffering of others. You know, every place I go, you know, we start this. When I was first invited to teach, you know, the invitations started coming a couple of years ago, you know, and when I went to the first one, they said, well, where have you been? We haven't heard of you. Well, I was where I was, you know. I didn't just get this thing just because we came into contact, you know. But here's the thing. Then I started getting all these invitations to teach at POC, you know, sittings, you know, people of color sittings. I said, I'm not a people of color teacher. I'm a dharma teacher. When you want to invite me to come and speak at your sangha, whole sangha, call me up. So it's like that. You see, we're so quick in our ways of categorizing and putting things together. We're so quick to label something, to give it its own little block, its own confined niche, and we miss the wondrousness of things. And so then when I started coming, you know, and I could talk about things. I mean, I could tell my stories. I'm not going to tell them tonight because we're talking about something different, but I tell about my encounter with the KKK, and I tell about how I'm living in a place where they're still down the street right now, and I tell about how I had to go back and face my fear, and only love could overcome that fear. Intellect told me I better get a gun for protection, but love could overcome that fear, you see. And so that was something that I had to learn. I didn't go back there, even though I may be doing something for people there. I went back there for me, for my deliverance. And I found in those dusty corners the same thing that resonated in some of the people there. You know, the same hatred. I couldn't see it. I didn't think I had it. But when I got back in a certain situation, it was apparent there was just a little bit still there. And I was able, you know, to uproot. And I imagine we can cut finer. And I could probably still find some. We have to be truthful with ourselves, you know. The truth really is the light. And if we're not, we're never going to be light enough. And so then they said, well, tell me how you get more people of color in your sangha. I said, well, seeming as I have an all-Caucasian sangha, I can't help you with that one. I said, you know, well, they said, well, we want, you know, more diversity. You can't just want more diversity. I mean, I said, how many people of color do you know? Do you interact with? How many of them do you invite over to your house? I mean, you know, so if we don't have this kind of interaction going on in our life, then our sanghas are probably not going to be that way. So he said, well, we need to teach on white privilege. I said, well, if I was white and you invited me to something where you're just going to blast me, and I said, you know, I'm probably not going to come, but if I do come, I'm going to come with my guard up, you know. So I'm wondering, like, what did the Buddha do then? Because he had, you know, I mean, he was in a place where they had the caste system. You know, they had the untouchables and the Brahmin and everybody in between. Where they had the rich and the poor, where they had, you know, all of these different types of people coming together. How did he have a cohesive community? I said, have we looked at what he did? Have we tried our own dharma? Have we gone through a study of the Sutta on non-conflict, where he starts talking about others do this, but we don't do that here. And he goes down a whole litany of things. And he says, they do that, but we don't do that here. So some of it is having the willingness to not do that here. And it really works. That's the thing. You don't have to tell me how blind I am and how insensitive I am. You know? If you point me to the right thing, and I understand what that is, and I make a vow, a determination, to see if that's in me, being willing to call it what it is. And I'm making a declaration and a decision that we won't have that here. You see, that's the activation of the willpower that brings the illumination and allows the heart to transform. That's another way. I mean, it's not the only way, you know, but it's a way that as sangha we can try. And so he has a teaching for whatever ails us. We just have to say, this is ailing us, you know, and where do we find, you know, this is the sickness, where do we find the cure? And if not, you know, our dharma is not worth 2 cents. We have to go outside and find the cure. Then I have to decide what I think about my teacher and his teaching. What does this dharma mean to you? What are you expecting from it? have we let ordinary, run-of-the-mill people who are themselves confused put limitations on it? This is a get it for yourself kind of thing. And he said it starts with being able to sit with yourself and still your mental fabrications. Then the mindfulness that arises will not be born out of a wandering eye that's touching everything out here. From the sense gates, internal base meeting external base. Consciousness arises. The three of those are in contact, and when contact comes, there it is. Comes feeling. I like it, I don't like it. Okay. Feeling comes. Craving, if I like it, I want more of it. If I don't like it, I want it to go away. Clinging. Birth. And goes on to death. So when we wash continually in this space of no thought, we're not just nowhere. And we're just not doing nothing or no thing. But we're positioning ourselves to access that which is more than mundane, ordinary, run-of-the-mill. And he said we have that capacity. And if we don't have it, I've never joined anything where there can only be one. In the Vajragata on fire, Vajragata asked the Buddha, he said, are you the only one? He said, no, I'm not the only one. He said, I have many in my community who have attained. He said, many monks and female monks, male and female monks. And I really don't like to say nuns, because I would be around and they would say Bhante, and Bhante means loosely, like beloved teacher or something like that, And then they have Ani, and it's like sister. So you have like the beloved teacher and you have the sister, And Sister Ani means auntie, And so I never call myself a nun. I am a female monk, just so nobody's confused. And I believe in it is just one election, whether it's male or female. That's it. And so, in these ways, when we get into these neutral spaces, that we stop diminishing things and just allow them to sit suspended before us until we merge with each thing that sits suspended before us, and we lose this sense of a personal self that's individual, different from the other. And we move into another space where we can access more than what's in this individual head. All moving through, and my time is winding down now, but all moving through this room are, I'm not a scientist, that's not my strong suit, but they tell me, that there's frequencies that if I was tuned the right way, like radio, I could pick them up. I know for a fact that sometimes, I'm sure some of you have had the experience when you're in meditation, you hit a frequency and you hear the news. But not only that, you can sit in a room with people and you can pick up their thoughts. Half the stuff we act on wasn't even our thought. It was somebody else's. You know? We just thought it was ours. But it came, it's like when you step in an elevator and a couple have been fighting, you know, and when you step in, they put a smile on their face and they look up at the floor. You know, everybody always looks up at the floor when the elevator door opens, you know, because it's just people coming in close proximity. That's just a reflex, you know, for people who see others as separate. Not for us, though. But even if they put a smile on their face and they look up at the floor, you know there was a tough exchange going on because you can feel it. You have the means to register. Yeah. It's like when your children are downstairs in the basement. You know, I call them children, but you know, the older ones, the ones you gotta watch. And, you know, and when they hear your footsteps at the top of the steps, you know, everybody scrambles, and when you get down there, the boys over there and the girls over there, but you can feel the temperature in the room. You can register the activity, and you know that it wasn't like that a few minutes ago, you know. And when you get on, they're like, how did she know? This is some natural capacity we have. What should we be getting from our what progress should we be making in being able to intuit these kinds of things as we develop our practice? So I say to you tonight, don't limit the Dharma and don't limit yourself. Don't chop up the teachings and throw this out and say, I'm a this, I'm only that, we only do this. I say to you, find the reason, like, what are you looking for? Why are you here? Ask yourself that question. Give it its value. We'll pay $100 to talk to a therapist for an hour and put $2 in the Dharma basket. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. That's how you understand generosity. I had one of my husbands, and you know, we were taught something coming up. Like we were taught to tithe, and so we tithe 10%. But then a little later we were taught, and that's your reasonable service. You haven't even started to give until you get above that. So my husband said, well, that's as far as I'm going. But I kept going. I went 10, then I went 15, then I went 20, then I went 25, then I went 30, then I went 35, then I went 40, then I got a divorce. And it's true. It's true. It's true. But I know that 40% brought me to the threshold of the Dharma, you see. So I have no regrets. I don't care. I don't care what they bought with the money. It's the intention, the Buddha said, that put me in that place of receiving. And so I say everything we do, everything we give, we do it for ourselves. You might think I'm doing it for you, but I do it for myself. So in that sense, there's no pride that can arise, you know, because I really know that every homeless child that I take care of, that I serve, I'm doing it for myself. Not surface doing it for myself, but in the deepest recesses, I am creating my own karma. And here's the thing though, even when we do good, karma's still karma. That means when something's planted, the fruit still has to come. If I'm trying to get off the wheel of conditioned existence, then I don't want good karma any more than bad karma. Because I might have good karma and come back in a good destination and somebody trip me up and mess me up. And now I got some bad karma coming behind the good karma. So let's bring it into it. That's what the Buddha said. There is something else. We don't have the capacity to understand it at this point. But as we keep moving, because we have understood something, and we have found what we have been putting into practice to be true, he says, then we can have some faith that the rest of what he told us was true. And so, as we go into our meditation, we're going to stretch before we do. Do we need to take a 10-minute break? Time to go out to the restroom, so it's 8:30.